Welcome back to 3450. I'm your host, Joe Dubzinski. James PONIEWOZIK.
PONIEWOZIK.
Yeah, and I'm Dubzinski.
You know how it is.
He's an American journalist and television critic. He is the chief TV critic for the New York Times.
Correct.
Previously wrote the Times Tuned-In column for 16 years. He documents the history of mass media from the early 1980s through today, revealing how Donald Trump merged with America's most powerful media to orchestrate his reinvention as a world leader. His new book, Audience of One, Donald Trump, Television, and the Fracturing of America. Welcome to the program, James.
Thanks for having me on.
Where do you start?
Where do we start?
Can we go back to when he was a kid?
You can start with the beginning of television. I can tell you about why I wrote the book. Wherever you'd like. But yeah, Donald Trump and television were born around the same time. That's one of the facts of his life. He was born in 1946. He was part of that baby boomer generation that was, really coming alive at the same time that basically American commercial television was, and was the first generation to grow up with this sort of other virtual space in the home. This visual medium that brought the entire world into your living room, and that grew up their whole lives with the awareness of, the actual world and this virtual world. So, in part, the story that I'm telling in the book, which is kind of a dual history of Donald Trump, the television creation, the cultural figure, and of American television as a cultural force, starts way back there, at the dawn of TV and the dawn of Trump.
Let me go back a little bit further than that with Donald. I mean, it seems like we've had some celebrities before that end up being into politics or president.
Yep.
Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
For instance, Jesse the Body Ventura.
Yep.
And now Donald Trump, who took the highest spot of the land. And thinking is, I guess, television has worked for them and against them. I mean, I was watching the debates the other day, and I thought, this is outrageously crazy. It's a lot of people on the stage doing that. Donald Trump did the same thing, but he had a reality show.
Yeah.
Kind of did the same thing.
One of the things I thought, and I thought this from the beginning of that Republican primary back in the 2016 election when I was covering it as a TV critic, was that I think one thing that Donald Trump intuited running in the primary, you got 16, 17 candidates, that's basically an elimination-based reality TV show. Mm-hmm. It's the size of the cast of a show like Survivor or The Apprentice, which Donald Trump hosted for 14 seasons, and he applied a lot of the principles that one sees in reality TV, this field he thrived in, to the campaign and to those debates in particular. The notion of always give the camera something outrageous to pay attention to you, right? Because you don't want to get lost in the edit. You don't want to get lost in the shuffle when there are 16, 17 voices out there. No attention, in a way, is bad attention. Because if you are the one insulting Megyn Kelly or, insulting Jeb Bush's wife or many of the other things that he did, you're the one who's being talked about in the stories the next day. You become the protagonist of the election. And that's why I really thought that there were things that maybe some political pundits didn't necessarily pick up on in his campaign, because they were viewing him through a traditional political frame rather than a television cultural frame. For instance, he goes into a debate and he launches into some out of nowhere attack against Rand Paul, who is polling less than 1%. Says something like, you shouldn't even be on this stage, and the analysis would always be, well, why is Donald Trump picking this pointless fight? Well, in the frame of, traditional politics, it's pointless. In the frame of reality TV, in the TV culture that Donald Trump has thrived in, which included pro wrestling and all these other things, the fight is the point, right? The fight proves to people that you're a fighter. It is sort of a meta argument that says, I'm hitting all these people. They can't even defend themselves. How do you expect them to stand up and protect you? It shows it is a theatrical performance for an audience that in many ways has become conditioned to seeing politics as TV theater. within the context of that world, that made him the winner in those debates.
I guess the thing that it started right off the bat when he was head of administration, and he brought in people who were ambassadors and whatever the case be, and he started losing them the same way. You're gone. Of course, he always said, "Well, I resigned."
Yeah.
But you got the feeling that he knew it was like reality again. Reality TV. It was like, okay, you're fired.
People being dramatically eliminated.
Exactly.
Also, the one I think reality TV aspect of the Trump administration. You're absolutely right. You have these flamboyant characters like the Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci, who come in and they get a lot of headlines for a little while and then they flame out and then you move on to the next sensation. And also this sense of everyone's competing against each other. This isn't just sort of the team of rivals approach to government. It's kind of the snake pit approach where, a lot of it has kind of been, different advisors battling each other within the administration, in the media and so on for the favor of Donald Trump, in much the same way as you saw on The Apprentice, how candidates would sort of compete to backstab against each other and climb on top of each other's heads for so that somebody else would get fired instead of them. Again, it's the reality TV thing of the constant struggle. Life is a constant fight, and there are a lot of overnight sensations that flare up and then get written off the show, and we move on to the next thing. Who remembers H.R. McMaster now? There are just so many trivia questions from the early years of the Trump administration.
A game for Trump yet?
Yeah, but you could fill up a good one. So,
do you think the point of where he really started being Donald Trump as we know him today was when he wrote his first book?
I think that was what catapulted him into national celebrity, certainly. As I trace it through Audience of One, I sort of see the genesis of Donald Trump, the character, the public performance, beginning even before he builds Trump Tower, like at the very beginning of the 80s, when he starts appearing on television, when he's interviewed by people like Tom Brokaw on the Today Show and Rona Barrett, the entertainment gossip journalist. Because he has made himself, before he's really done anything in the business world, he's made himself into this tabloid figure in New York. And he comes along at a time when, this is the era of Dallas, of Dynasty, of Robin Leach and Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. A time when, number one, you sort of have this Reagan-era turn toward, a more favorable view of rich people in business and capitalist success and all that. And also when celebrity and wealth in itself is becoming a kind of performance. And the culture is sort of hungry for this figure who is the brash, belligerent, braggadocious, cocky, swaggering personification of wealth and self-indulgence. And, Trump loved playing that. And so, he was certainly on a regional scale in the New York media doing that long before The Art of the Deal. But I think The Art of the Deal, becoming a best-selling book, that was kind of what made him, a national name. That's the point. Now he's going on Oprah. Now he's going on Donahue. Now he is being, played as a character on Saturday Night Live, which is sort of, that's like the highest honor that, one can get in the television pantheon. I certainly think that bit of branding made him into the national pop culture figure that he became.
Do you think that, he used to be a Democrat, and do you think when he turned into the Republican side, do you think that had something to do with it? I mean, did he see more opportunities on the Republican side than he did in the Democrats?
I think he used to be a lot of things. I mean, he was a Democrat just as a practical matter. He was a, businessman in New York who needed, contacts in government to get things done. And in New York City, it is more advantageous to do that through, the Democrats who usually hold most of the power. He briefly flirted with running for the third party Reform Party nomination in 2000. He has had, as we know, a lot of ideological jumping around in his career. He, used to be before, for socialized medicine before he wanted to get rid of Obamacare. Policy-wise, I'm not sure that there's a lot of, core principles with him. I think that, there have always been these core notions of even going back to when he would dabble in political statements back in the 80s of we're being taken advantage of. Even our allies are ripping us off, and it's unfair. And this idea of like we need to look out for number one. We need to keep the world from picking our pockets, and this sort of law and order demagoguing, which he did, for instance, in the Central Park 5 case in the late 80s in New York, which really has a lot of parallels to the way that he talks about race and other groups in America now as president. These notions, I certainly think, by the 2000s, when he becomes a more political figure in earnest, there was just a lot more receptiveness to this in the Republican Party. And getting back to the media, there's a media avenue through which to pursue this, which is Fox News exists now, and he became. We talk about how The Apprentice made him a household name, and helped catapult him to the White House. I think in many ways, Fox News, where he was a regular commentator for years before he announced his run for president, did about as much for him. And that gave him this conduit to this conservative base to whom that kind of argument was appealing.
Do you think that his upbringing, or do you think something triggered him in the middle? I mean, do you think it was his family that kind of leaned him in this direction, or was it that one day he just got teed off at the world, so to speak?
That leaned him in this political direction?
Well, political lifestyle that he does. I mean, his reputation of not paying bills.
Yeah.
His construction, things like that. That didn't come overnight. It was...
without sort of pointing... it's funny, in America in 2019, like, we are all amateur Donald Trump psychiatrists, right? And without getting too far in this, certainly when you look at influences with him, a lot of it, I think, goes back to the father, either emulating or pushing against him. Like, he went into Manhattan real estate, and I think the whole idea of, becoming a celebrity of business, in part as a reaction to his father, who, he always saw his business as kind of dowdy and focused on the outer boroughs and not exciting and glamorous. On the other hand, that stiffing your contractors thing and all that was kind of a Fred Trump special. Mm-hmm. I think that, some of what, he did and the way he conducted himself in business and life, was kind of learned from his father and learned from father figures like Roy Cohn, who was very, influential on him as a mentor in his early life. But I also think more than like politically, ideologically, just a lot of his mindset, I think, comes from these early lessons that he apparently got from his father, which is particularly just viewing life as a, red in tooth and claw competition. Mm-hmm. And, Fred Trump was the one who's one of his favorite phrases was, killer. You want to be a killer in this world. And there are killers and there are losers. And, I think so many of the ways that Donald Trump has just sort of has framed, politics, business, the experience of life consistently throughout his career is this idea of everything is a competition. Everything has a winner and loser. You can only gain by somebody else losing something. And that, by the way, is something that sort of philosophically works very well with the aesthetic of reality TV, where, those are all about kind of, engineering a social experiment where you win by getting someone else eliminated, and your loss is somebody else's gain. This notion of life as competition kind of dovetail with that, which was one reason among many that I think he did well in that media environment.
I didn't really follow Trump when he was a younger person, but I look at his kids, and especially Trump Jr., Donald Jr. They don't look like they have the same get up and fight that Donald has.
I don't know that they do. Like, Donald Trump had a pretty privileged upbringing, but, there's privileged and there's privileged. And I think that, when you grow up with that level of comfort, there's probably, you're going to lose a certain amount of scrappiness. I would honestly say if there's one of his kids that I could see becoming a Donald Trump-like figure in the future, like a successor politically, I do think it is maybe Donald Jr., who in many ways is sort of a mini Trump in the way that he uses media. He very much loves trolling people on